My name is Jennifer Hayes, 35 years old, an interior designer who built my own path in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was a Tuesday night when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom that stopped me cold. Don't call or come over. We're done. My heart sank, but I didn't cry or beg. I typed back 2 words. Got it. That was it. Years of pouring my heart and money into my family, covering Mom's medical bills, bailing out my brother's debts, keeping their restaurant afloat, gone in one text. I'd always been the odd one out, the one who chose design over their family business, the one they never saw as enough. But that text, it was a line in the sand. I wasn't going to chase them. By midnight, my phone was blowing up. Missed calls, voicemails, texts piling in. Mom's number flashed again and again, then my brother's, even Dad's. They were panicking, and I could guess why. I'd been their safety net for years, and now I was done. What happened next flipped everything I thought I knew about my family upside down. Stick around to hear how it all unraveled. If you've ever felt pushed out by family, hit that like button, drop a comment with your story, and subscribe to catch the rest of this wild ride. Growing up in Tulsa, our family seemed like the perfect American dream. My father ran a chain of restaurants, a local legend who turned a single diner into a thriving business. Mom gave up her banking career to stand by his side, managing the home and smoothing over his rough edges. My brother Brandon, 4 years younger, was the golden child, the one they pinned their hopes on to carry the family legacy. Me, I was Jennifer Hayes, the odd one out dreaming of spaces and colors, not menus and profit margins. From early on, Dad made it clear what he expected. "The restaurants are our future," he'd say at dinner, his voice heavy with authority. "You'll learn the business, Jennifer." But I wasn't drawn to grease-stained aprons or balancing books. I wanted to design interiors, homes, places where people felt alive. By high school, I was sketching floor plans in notebooks, imagining sleek offices and cozy living rooms. When I told Dad I wanted to study interior design, he laughed. "That's a hobby, not a career," he said, his tone sharp enough to cut. Mom stayed quiet, her eyes darting away, already choosing sides. At 17, I applied to a top art school in Chicago. The acceptance letter came and I was over the moon, but Dad's reaction crushed me. "If you're not joining the restaurants, you're on your own," he said, arms crossed. "No tuition, no support." Mom nodded along, her silence louder than words. Brandon, barely 13, smirked like he'd won something. I felt like an outsider in my own home, their favoritism toward him already carving a divide. I worked 2 jobs, waitressing and tutoring, to cover what scholarships didn't. Late nights, endless shifts, and a mountain of student loans got me through. Dad never asked how I managed, and Mom's occasional "I'm proud of you" felt hollow when she'd turn around and gush over Brandon's half-hearted attempts at helping with the restaurants. He could do no wrong, even when he skipped classes or botched orders. I remember one Christmas when I was home from college, Brandon forgot to lock up one of the restaurants and a break-in cost thousands. Dad brushed it off. "He's learning," he said, while I got a lecture for missing a family dinner to finish a design project. The distance grew. Dad's focus was always on Brandon, the son who'd inherit the empire no matter how little he cared. Mom followed Dad's lead, her warmth reserved for him. I tried to stay close to her, calling on weekends, sharing my sketches, but her responses were short, distracted. "Brandon's helping at the restaurant," she'd say, like it was a badge of honor. I wanted to scream, "What about me?" But I swallowed it, thinking one day they'd see my worth. By the time I graduated, the rift was undeniable. I'd built a name for myself in Tulsa, designing boutique hotels and upscale homes. But at family gatherings, it was always about the restaurants. "When are you joining us?" Dad would ask, like my career didn't exist. Brandon would chime in, joking about my fancy drawings, and Mom would smile, never defending me. Their favoritism wasn't just a feeling, it was a wall, and I was on the wrong side of it. Looking back, those years set the stage for everything that followed. I kept trying to prove myself, to earn a place in their world, but the harder I pushed, the clearer it became. They'd chosen Brandon, and I was just the backup plan they didn't want. After art school, I threw myself into building my interior design career. Chicago had taught me to think big, transforming spaces into stories, not just rooms. Back in Tulsa, I started small, redesigning local cafes, turning cramped diners into inviting havens. My first big break came at 27, when a boutique hotel chain hired me to revamp their lobbies across Oklahoma. Clean lines, warm textures, and a touch of modern elegance, my designs caught eyes. Soon, upscale restaurants and private homes were calling, and my name, Jennifer Hayes, started appearing in local design blogs. By 30, I was signing contracts worth six figures, building a reputation as Tulsa's go-to designer for luxury spaces. But home was a different story. 5 years ago, Mom fell seriously ill. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. Her treatment would cost tens of thousands, maybe more. Dad's restaurants were struggling with rising costs, and insurance barely covered the basics. I didn't hesitate. I wired money for her hospital bills, covering specialist visits and medications. "We'll pay you back," Dad said over the phone, his voice clipped, but I knew better than to expect it. Mom sent a text. "Thank you, Jennifer, but that was it. No calls, no real gratitude." It stung, but I told myself it was for her health, not their approval. Then there was Brandon. My brother, barely out of his 20s, had started a side business, a food truck venture that tanked within months. He'd racked up debts, maxed out credit cards, and couldn't cover his share of the family restaurant expenses. Dad called me one evening, his tone all business. "Brandon needs help," he said, like it was my job to fix it. I sent the money, $30,000 to clear his debts, and another $20,000 to keep the restaurants afloat. Brandon never said thank you. Instead, at a family barbecue, he bragged about turning things around himself as if my money hadn't saved him. Dad clapped him on the back, proud, while I stood there invisible. I kept giving. When one of the restaurants needed new equipment, a walk-in fridge that cost a fortune, I covered it. When Mom's treatment required a specialist in Dallas, I paid for the travel and consultations. Each time, I hoped they'd see me, really see me, not just as a checkbook. But at family dinners, the talk was always about the restaurants, Brandon's potential, or Dad's plans for expansion. My work, barely a mention. Once I shared a magazine feature about my hotel designs, thinking Mom might be proud. She glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but Brandon's working so hard at the restaurant." I forced a smile, my chest tight with disappointment. The pattern wore me down. I'd call Mom to check in, hoping for a real conversation, but she'd pivot to Brandon's latest idea or Dad's stress. Dad never asked about my projects, only calling when they needed something. "The restaurant's short this month," he'd say, and I'd transfer the funds, feeling more like an ATM than a daughter. Brandon, meanwhile, acted entitled, like my success was owed to the family. "You're doing well, so why not help out?" he said once, casual, like my years of grinding meant nothing. Looking back, I see how naive I was, thinking money would earn their respect. Every check I wrote, every bill I paid was me trying to bridge the gap they'd built. But they took it all, hundreds of thousands over the years, and gave nothing back, not even a nod of acknowledgement. The hurt piled up, quiet but heavy, and I started to wonder if I'd ever be enough for them. 5 years into my career, I pitched a bold idea to my family. My interior design business was thriving, and I'd been dreaming of a new venture, a sustainable design firm focused on eco-friendly materials for hotels and restaurants. It wasn't just a passion project. It was a business plan backed by market research showing demand for green design in Tulsa's growing hospitality scene. I needed capital to scale up, and for the first time, I thought my family might see my vision as more than a hobby. I prepared a presentation complete with cost breakdowns and projected returns, and invited them to a meeting at our family home. I stood in the dining room, my laptop open, slides ready. Dad sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, his face unreadable. Mom hovered nearby, setting out coffee, avoiding my eyes. Brandon slouched in his chair, scrolling on his phone, barely paying attention. His wife, Tara Hayes, sat quietly beside him, offering me a small smile. I took a deep breath and started explaining how sustainable materials could cut costs long-term and attract eco-conscious clients. This could put Tulsa on the map. I said, my voice steady despite the nerves. I'm asking for a $200,000 investment. I'll pay it back with interest. Dad didn't let me finish. A pipe dream, he interrupted, leaning forward. You think hotels care about recycled wood? They want cheap, not fancy experiments. His words hit like a slap, but I pushed on, showing data on client demand. Brandon snorted, not even looking up. Sounds like a waste of money, he said. Why don't you stick to decorating houses? I clenched my fists under the table, my face burning. I'd spent months on this plan, and they were dismissing it without a glance. Mom stayed silent, rearranging napkins, her usual way of dodging conflict. I turned to her, hoping for a shred of support. Mom, you've seen my work. You know I can do this. She hesitated, then mumbled, It sounds risky, Jennifer. The restaurants are what we know. Her words stung worse than Dad's. I'd paid for her treatments, kept their business afloat, and still I was the outsider. Tara spoke up, her voice soft but clear. I think it's innovative, she said, glancing nervously at Brandon. Sustainability is a big deal now. For a moment I felt a spark of hope, but Brandon shot her a look and she shrank back, saying nothing more. Dad waved a hand, cutting off the discussion. We're not throwing money at this, he said. Brandon's working on a new restaurant location. That's our priority. Brandon smirked like he'd won a competition I didn't know I was in. I tried one last time. This isn't a handout, I said, my voice rising. It's an investment with returns. I've built my career from nothing, you know I'm good for it. Dad shook his head. You chose your path, Jennifer. The family business comes first. Brandon added, Maybe if you helped out at the restaurants, we'd take you seriously. I wanted to scream. I'd given them hundreds of thousands, bailed them out repeatedly, and they still saw me as a kid with a sketchbook. The room felt smaller, the air thick with their dismissal. I packed up my laptop, my hands shaking. Tara caught my eye as I left, mouthing, I'm sorry. But it didn't help. Driving home, I replayed their words, each one a reminder that I'd never be enough. Dad's focus was on Brandon, always. Brandon, no matter how many times I proved myself. Mom's silence was just as bad, her loyalty tied to Dad's vision. Even Tara, who saw potential in my idea, couldn't stand up to them. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my business plan. I'd poured everything into it, just like I'd poured everything into my family. But their rejection wasn't just about money, it was about me. They didn't believe in me, and that hurt more than I could admit. I didn't know it then, but that meeting was the beginning of the end. One evening, after a family dinner, I overheard something I wasn't meant to. The table was cleared, and I'd stepped into the kitchen to grab my jacket, planning to head home. Tara lingered near the sink, her hands fidgeting with a dish towel. She glanced around, then pulled me aside, her voice barely a whisper. Jennifer, there's something you need to know, she said, her eyes darting toward the dining room where Dad and Brandon were talking. Brandon's been taking money from the restaurants. Thousands. It's why they're struggling. My stomach dropped. I knew the restaurants were in trouble, but I thought it was just bad business. He's been skimming for years, Tara added, her voice shaking. I found receipts, hidden accounts. He's lying to your parents. I stood frozen, processing her words. Tara looked terrified, like she'd just betrayed her own husband. Before I could respond, I heard Dad's voice rise from the next room. I crept closer, staying out of sight behind the doorway. He was talking to Mom, their voices low but sharp. We need to finalize the will, Dad said, his tone firm. Brandon's the only one keeping this family together. Jennifer's off doing her own thing, she doesn't care about us. My heart pounded. Mom murmured something I couldn't catch, then said, She's given us so much, Stephen. Dad cut her off. Money, not loyalty. Brandon's our legacy. We'll leave the restaurants to him. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. They were cutting me out, erasing me from their future after everything I'd done. I slipped out the back door, my mind racing. All those years paying Mom's medical bills, bailing out Brandon, saving their restaurants, and they saw me as disloyal. I drove home in a haze, replaying Tara's confession and Dad's words. Brandon's theft explained the constant cash shortages, the late vendor payments I'd covered. And yet, they were choosing him, rewarding him. The betrayal burned, but I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Don't call or come over. We're done." The words hit like a punch. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. This wasn't just about the will, it was personal. Mom, the one I'd always been closest to, was shutting me out. I typed back, "Got it," and hit send before I could overthink it. My fingers hovered over the call button, but I stopped. No more chasing, no more pleading. If they wanted me gone, I'd give them exactly that. I opened my banking app and canceled every recurring payment I'd set up for them. Mom's medical expenses gone. Brandon's debt payments stopped. The restaurant's utility bills no longer my problem. I'd spent over $300,000 keeping them afloat, hundreds of hours working to fund their lives, and they'd thrown it back in my face. Cutting those ties felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for years, but it also hurt. I wasn't just cutting off money. I was letting go of the hope that they'd ever see me. As I sat there staring at the confirmation emails for the canceled transactions, I felt a mix of relief and rage. Tara's words kept echoing, Brandon's theft hidden for years. How long had they known? Had Mom and Dad covered for him, or were they clueless? Either way, their choice to favor him over me was clear. I thought about calling Tara, asking for more details, but I didn't. She'd taken a risk telling me, and I wasn't sure where her loyalties lay. That night, I lay awake, the text from Mom burning in my mind. "We're done." It wasn't just a message, it was a declaration. They'd chosen their side, and I wasn't on it. But I wasn't the same girl who'd begged for their approval. I'd built my life without them, and now I'd protect it. Their betrayal had lit a fire in me, and I wasn't going to let it burn me down. By midnight, my phone was a storm of notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. Mom's number flashed first, then Brandon's, then Dad's. They must have realized I'd cut off the money. I didn't answer. I sat on my couch staring at the screen, each buzz tightening the knot in my chest. After years of being their safety net, I'd pulled the plug and they were unraveling. Brandon's first voicemail was venomous. "You think you can just walk away, Jennifer?" He spat. "You're selfish, leaving us high and dry like this." Selfish? I nearly laughed. I'd paid off his debts, propped up the restaurants, and he had the nerve to call me selfish. His next message was worse. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice low. "We'll take legal action if we have to." I deleted it, my hands steady but my heart racing. Legal action for what? Saving them from his mess for years. Mom's texts came next. A flood of guilt trips. "How could you do this to me, Jennifer?" one read. "After everything I've been through, you're abandoning your own mother." Another, "I raised you better than this." I stared at those words, her attempt to twist the knife. She'd always known how to pull at my heartstrings, reminding me of the late-night talks we used to have, the ones I thought meant something. But now, it felt like manipulation, not love. I didn't reply. I couldn't let her words drag me back. Dad's call came at 1 a.m. I let it go to voicemail, his voice booming through the speaker. "Jennifer, you need to fix this," he said, like I was an employee who'd botched an order. "The restaurants can't survive without your help. You owe us that much." Owe them? I'd given over $300,000, years of my life, and they'd cut me out of their will, dismissed my career, chosen Brandon despite his lies. I saved the voicemail not out of guilt, but as a reminder of who they were. By morning, the messages kept coming. Brandon sent another text. "You're tearing this family apart. This is on you." I could picture him pacing, blaming everyone but himself for the hole he'd dug. Tara called once but didn't leave a message. I wondered if she felt caught in the middle knowing what Brandon had done but too scared to speak up again. Mom's next voicemail was softer, almost pleading. "Jennifer, please," she said, her voice cracking. "We're family. You can't just turn your back on us." I wanted to believe she meant it, but her text, "We're done," still burned in my mind. Family didn't write you off like that. Dad's second call came that afternoon. I picked up thinking, maybe he'd admit they were wrong. Instead, he launched in. "You're putting your mother's health at risk," he said. "Her treatments aren't cheap, and the restaurants are bleeding. You need to step up." Not a word about the will, Brandon's theft, or their betrayal. I gripped the phone, my voice calm but cold. "I've stepped up for years, Dad. I'm done." He paused, then said, "You'll change your mind when you see what this does to us." I hung up, my resolve hardening. The barrage didn't stop. Brandon's next message threatened to expose me, whatever that meant. "Everyone will know how you betrayed us," he wrote. I rolled my eyes. Betrayed them? After I'd carried their weight for years, Mom sent another text invoking memories of my childhood. "Remember when I helped you with your first sketches?" she wrote. "I've always been there for you." But she hadn't been. Not when I needed her to stand up for me, not when they laughed at my dreams. I stayed silent through it all. Each message, each call was a desperate grab to pull me back into their chaos. But I saw it clearly now: they didn't want me, just my money. I checked my bank account, confirming the canceled payments. No more covering Mom's medical bills, no more bailing out Brandon, no more saving Dad's restaurants. I'd spent years trying to earn their respect, but respect wasn't what they offered. It was control, and I was done giving it to them. By the end of the week, their panic had only grown. Their words, angry, pleading, threatening, piled up, but I didn't waver. I'd made my choice not out of spite, but survival. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I was Jennifer Hayes, and I was done being their backup plan. A week later, I met them at a Tulsa cafe. I'd agreed to one last conversation, not to reconcile, but to close the door for good. The air was thick with tension as I walked in, spotting Dad, Mom, and Brandon at a corner table. Tara wasn't there. She'd texted me an apology, saying she couldn't face the fallout. I sat down, my posture straight, my resolve unshaken. I wasn't the same Jennifer who'd begged for their approval years ago. I started with the truth. I sold my sustainable design project, I said, my voice steady. A national firm bought it for $1 million. Their eyes widened, but I didn't pause. "I built that from scratch without your help, despite your doubts." Dad's jaw tightened. Mom looked down, and Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I leaned forward. "I gave you everything: money, time, my trust. And you threw it away, chose Brandon over me even after he stole from you." I didn't mention Tara's name, protecting her secret. Brandon's face reddened. "You're lying," he snapped. "You're just jealous, trying to tear us down." I didn't flinch. "The receipts don't lie, Brandon." "I know what you did." Mom's hand flew to her mouth, but she didn't speak. Dad's voice was sharp. "You don't get to judge us," he said. "You walked away from the family business." I laughed, a bitter sound. I walked away. "You pushed me out, Dad. You cut me from your will, called me disloyal." Mom tried her usual tactic, her voice soft and pleading. "Jennifer, we're your family. You can't turn your back on us now." I met her eyes, unflinching. "You turned your back first, Mom. That text, 'We're done,' was your choice." She flinched, tears welling, but I wasn't swayed. "I'm done being your safety net," I said. "I deserve respect, not manipulation. If you can't give that, we're finished." Brandon scoffed. "You think you're better than us? You'll come crawling back." I shook my head. "No, Brandon. I won't." I stood my chair, scraping the floor. "This is it," I said. "No more money, no more calls, no more chances." Dad's face hardened. "You'll regret this, Jennifer," he said, echoing Brandon's threat from a week ago. I didn't respond. I walked out the cafe door, swinging shut behind me, my heart heavy but free. I didn't look back. A year later, I heard the fallout through mutual friends. The family restaurants went bankrupt, unable to survive without my financial support. Brandon faced legal trouble. Vendors sued him when his hidden accounts came to light, exposing years of theft. Mom and Dad retreated into a quiet, isolated life, their legacy in ruins. Tara, I learned, had left Brandon starting fresh somewhere else. I didn't reach out. That chapter was closed. I moved forward, pouring my energy into my design firm. The sale of my project gave me the freedom to expand, hiring a team, taking on international clients. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, built on my terms, not theirs. I found peace in setting boundaries, in choosing myself over a family that never chose me. The pain of their betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined me. Looking back, I learned something vital. Respect starts with yourself. I spent years trying to earn their love, thinking I had to prove my worth. But no amount of money or sacrifice could change how they saw me. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was survival. It taught me to value my own worth, to walk away from those who don't. I hope you listening to this story take that to heart. Family isn't an obligation to endure pain. It's a bond that should lift you up. If it doesn't, you have the right to let go. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. It wasn't easy to share, but it's my truth. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Drop a comment below, and let's talk. Your stories matter, and I'm grateful for every one of you who listened.